According to Far Out magazine, Dennis Wilson of the Beach Boys took a swim in the Marina Del Rey on December 28, 1983, and died. Nobody was really sure why he jumped into the water, but he did, and that is a fact. He had gone through a divorce about 3 years earlier, so maybe he or she tossed some stuff off of his boat, and Dennis thought now was as good a time as any to get in the water and retrieve them. I would go with a big no on that one, though. Regardless of his reasons for going into the water, he did not come back out alive. Sometime earlier, say about 6 years earlier to be exact, Dennis had recorded a solo album, a solo studio album. He was an avid lover of the ocean, and yes, the one that he eventually died in. The name of the album was Pacific Ocean Blue, and it was filled with sad ballads, songs filled with pain and emotion, and plenty of things that would remind him of those beautiful ocean waves. You know, the ones that killed him. When the album was completed, the Beach Boys were all over the place, where, well, not Brian, he was, no one really knows what Brian was up to most of the time. Everyone else was fighting for the right to drive the Beach Boys into the future. Dennis had been working on a solo album quite a number of years back, but he had hurt his hand and wasn't able to complete the first attempt, and for that matter, couldn't even play drums for the Beach Boys as they had to hire a replacement for him. The hiring of a replacement drummer, Ricky Fattar, just escalated Dennis's drinking problems, 'cause nothing makes you feel more comfortable in your position than being replaced. During his recovery, Dennis pretty much just stayed at the ocean like he always has done. He was, after all, pretty much the only member of the band who actually surfed, which is kind of funny when you think about it and how the Beach Boys was the surfer band. He was very much the opposite of his brothers, who were introverts. Dennis was impulsive, which is probably one of the reasons for the last swim in the ocean of his. All that time away from the band during his recovery had made him think again about completing his solo album. He still had a number of pieces from his first attempt, and during his recovery from his hand injury, he had added to that list of potential songs. By this time, Mike Love had assumed control of the driving force behind where the Beach Boys would go, and he had chosen to go down the road of the nostalgia act. This was a push that Dennis needed to complete his solo album, as it was his only chance that these songs would ever be heard or released. Pacific Ocean Blue was not a great success. I mean, it was in the 70s, and the record definitely sounds like the 70s for certain. But the ballads have an edge to them. Wilson opens up a world that is definitely not the same world as the Beach Boys lived in at the time, so for that reason alone, it's a refreshing change. It feels like some of the tracks have what, in my mind, looking back at this retroactively, a very Pink Floyd feel to it, but without the really good guitar playing. Far Out Music kind of put it nicely. The prime example of Wilson's ability to translate his unique sensibilities to the kind of music that audiences had come to expect from a Wilson brother is River Song, featuring Carl on co-lead vocals. River Song props Wilson's soulful howl up with a lush wall of sound that nearly reaches gospel levels of energy at its peak. Through his choked bray, Dennis longs for escape from the city life that was stifling him. It remains a beautiful, bittersweet encapsulation of black sheep of the Wilson family. Admittedly, the most alluring parts of Pacific Ocean Blue are the most macabre. The frequent references to wanting to return to the water, the eroded croak that years of drug and alcohol abuse turned his voice into, the pained love songs that could be directly traced back to Wilson's own crumbling personal life. Pacific Ocean Blue had every right to be a car crash, thanks to the realities of Wilson's daily life, and he doesn't do much to shy away from those ugly realities. You can easily tell that the making of this album was probably very good therapy for Dennis, who by the time had quite the number of demons to deal with in his world. Dennis was never really able to follow up with a second album, mostly due to the continued disintegration of his life around him. His erratic behavior and the lackluster performance of Pacific Ocean Blue pretty much ended any chance at a solo career in the music industry. The album quickly fell out and drifted off into obscurity. In fact, it was pretty difficult to get before the internet came along, as it just was out of print. As his life began to move towards that last swim in the ocean, he continued to perform with the Beach Boys. Although drug and alcohol abuse caused Dennis to quit and rejoin the band numerous times, Wilson also felt a sense of resentment from his bandmates, and although Pacific Ocean Blue wasn't a major hit, it did begin to eclipse the popularity of the band's most recent LP, Love You, and would go on to outsell the MIU album. They kept telling me I had my solo album now, like I should go off in a corner and leave the Beach Boys to them. Wilson told Rolling Stone in 1977, the album really bothers them. They don't like to admit it's doing so well. They never even acknowledge it in interviews. The water continued to be a refuge for Wilson away from the tumult of the Beach Boys, but soon his own addictions were beginning to take a toll. On the front of Pacific Ocean Blue, Wilson appears heavily bearded, years removed from his refined good looks of the Beach Boys' heyday. Rocky relationships with Fleetwood Mac's Christine McVie and Sean Love, the alleged daughter of Wilson's bandmate and cousin Mike Love, caused Wilson to continue to try and find refuge in the friendly arms of the ocean. On December 28, 1983, those friends' arms turned fatal, and Dennis Wilson drowned off the coast of California. Ultimately, it was decided that Wilson's body should be returned to the same waters that gave him so much life, and ironically wound up taking that life as well. At the time, only Navy veterans were allowed to be buried at sea, but President Ronald Reagan overruled the custom to make an exception for Wilson. With that, Dennis Wilson became forever committed to the Pacific Ocean, the same place where his legacy largely sits with Pacific Ocean Blue.